market my new book, Hitting Secrets from Baseball's Graveyard. It's Tris Speaker on the cover, and Tris was one of the subjects that I examined for years. I actually started out with the guys of the Deadball Era like Ty Cobb. I thought that Ty Cobb was going to be my poster child, and I still am fascinated by his spread of the hands. And he would do this in a lot of, I don't know about a lot, there's not a lot of video evidence of any of these guys, but I've seen a clip where he's, standing in front of the camera, and yeah, I see you. And he's repeating that motion right there. That was a tremendous tip-off, I felt. But anyway, I poured over what videos I could find, and the photographic record was it was nice to have, but a lot of photographs are somewhat staged, especially in an era when shutter speeds were really slow, so hitters couldn't actually enter into the active part of the swing where the bat was moving. And that was really turned out to be one of the most interesting parts, which I had to reconstruct completely from reverse engineering. I did a lot of experimentation in the old backyard back here, which is freezing right now. You see the Christmas tree behind me. It's cold outside, and what better to do in the dead of winter than talk about baseball? But I wanted to talk about just a few things here, maybe three major things from a book project that took me 5 years of intensive study and really about 20 years of trying to learn to be a hitting guru for my son, which didn't turn out very well, but not for him, but at least it taught me how little I know, and that's what really got me interested in the history of guys who would year after year flirt with 400, have 600 at bats, and strike out 24 times. That's pretty incredible. Those guys, Cobb, Speaker, a little bit later, George Sisler, Fred Clark, of course Eddie Collins, LaJoy, Hannes Wagner, but also as I got into this more and more, I started to link them more with the 1890s, and that's when I made the acquaintance of probably one of I would say the greatest living authority on 19th century baseball, Roy Kerr, who practically wrote the last chapter of my book for me. He was very supportive and very flattering about the conclusions that I reached. But here, let me start quickly, because I'm already being too long about this. Forgive my bad knee, which in the process of my experimentation, I managed to bugger up pretty well, the old sartorius tendon. But I was trying to look for ways to push off of that and drive into the ball. Actually, what you really start with, let's go back to Cobb's thing. People had the hand spread all the time in the 1890s and 1880s. Cobb was not the one who invented that. I don't know why I see that so often, even in Cobb's day, in the early 1900s, the teens, there were guys all over the place who did that. Cobb's spread was a little more exaggerated than most. But what's going on with this is, I'm convinced, the bottom hand pulling down as the top hand drives down into the ball. So in a way, they're working in opposite directions. This hand's going like this into the body, while this hand drives into the ball. This is exactly what Cobb was doing for that little video clip. What's happening here? I think what you're seeing is a line that's going directly into the ball at a slightly downward angle. This is not the circular swing of the big home run hitters who would come up shortly thereafter. They kind of officially marked the end of the Deadball Era. Babe Ruth, by the way, was not one of those guys with the big circular swing. Most of what I'm talking about right here, the Babe did as much as anybody else. Ruth started with his feet together like that. Didn't start that way, but he came back with his feet together, real big hitch, and then he rode up with the bat. Of course, he had the hands down on the end, and when he finished, he was, in many photographs and videos, he's got his back foot all the way off the ground, and he's driving down into the ball in a straight angle. Now, the coming forward on the front foot is absolutely key, because if you're just doing this, I think maybe some of the light hitters, the wee Willie Keelers of the 90s and into the early century, I think maybe this is just about exactly what they were doing. They were just kind of, they were aiming for the center of the ball and pop, putting a little backspin right into that center part, making it hop off the bat. It's like a game of pepper, and you get the ball to hopefully hop over the infielders and land on some grass out there. Those were singles hitters. The guys of the 1890s, you so often see them on their baseball cards that appeared in tobacco products. They would be standing like this, and it took me a long time to figure out when the heck they were getting ready for, when they were just kind of, hanging out with their hands right in front of their buttons. And the only way I can see that enters immediately into a productive swing is if they're cocking the bottom hand with the front foot and just kind of lifting up and then coming down. I can see on that camera right there when I do that, and this is something that continues to amaze me. I feel like I'm swinging right down on the ball, but because my weight is shifting so far forward, I'm really trying to transfer 100% to the front foot. When I do that, the swing ends up really being very level. It doesn't have that dip in the middle that Mickey Mantle, my childhood hero, you pump back and then there's kind of a whoosh right in the center, and then the bat goes up again. There are still people to this day that say that those great 50s hitters were trying to hit the ball going up, and that the swing was essentially an uppercut swing. It certainly had an uppercut, but I think even when they hit the ball most productively, they were still coming down right before they came out of their curve. It's that backspin that made the ball hop off of their barrel. And I think the guys of the 1890s and the early 1900s, I think they realized that. They had, of course, much longer, heavier bats, but they didn't have the big barrels, and they could hit the ball just about anywhere that didn't end up on our top hand. They probably, as I say, if you were wee Willie Keeler, you wouldn't really have much of a lower body action. But I think many of them, this is how I managed to bang out my leg, trying to figure out how to get something out of the lower body. But I do think that the ones like Dan Brothers, who, how did those guys hit that dead ball well over 400 feet? But some of them, like Dan, did. And I have to believe that there was something going on in the lower body with those guys. So the hands are one thing, the spread of the hands, the downward chop, the hands working in collaborative, so I call it a reverse parallel reverse motion. They're just doing like that, lying straight down into the body. And I think another thing that, I've already talked about shifting the weight, but that would be another thing. The weight somehow, even if it's as simple as just bringing the foot up and then dropping it down again, you have to get the barrel to level out a little bit, you have to come up on the front foot. Don't be afraid about riding up on the front foot. I felt that there were probably guys, when you get into the, say, Tris Speaker again, who's on the cover of my book, there must have been a lot more going on with those legs. I think somehow they were really driving into the ball. You start figuring, okay, maybe that's where they fell back more and didn't transfer weight completely. And there were probably some guys who did that. I think Sam Crawford was probably one of them, Ty Cobb's teammate. That's not what Speaker did. Speaker, and I know this because I've seen journalistic evidence. There were actually recorded reports of how he swung. I don't know exactly how this happened, but I know that he was taking some kind of hop to get up on his, of course he was still on his back foot before he swung, but that little hop created forward momentum. Charlie Lau said he, in the 70s, was visiting Australia, and he saw Australian kids who, of course, their primary experience of hitting balls with wooden objects was probably cricket. And it's a little bit of a cricket move. There are cricketers who still sometimes do that same kind of thing. I think Tris Speaker was doing something like that. I can't do it very well because it's probably part of what messed up my knee. I think a lot of other guys besides Tris were probably doing that to some extent. I can tell from some of the still photos that guys would start like this. And I don't know if I'm talking about 2 or 3 things now. My time's running out and I hate talking to cameras, but I'll just wrap it up here. I think guys would kind of start out with this, and the back foot was not even very well anchored. They didn't want it to be, because when they went back into their load, which wasn't very far with the hands, again, the hands are just kind of right over the buttons. They go back like this, and then they'd be ready to, in sports, in baseball and any sport, if you want to go one direction, you go back into the reverse direction to wind up, to store some energy. So I think they were like this, and then back, and then drop on the ball. And I love this feedback that I'm getting from this, because let me show you the finish again, if I can keep from killing my Christmas tree. There's that high finish that you see on so many photographs and baseball cards. The hands are over the front shoulder, and often the back foot is barely touching the ground or completely off. Ruth would often end up that way again. He wasn't all that different from the others. And, I'm not, with my front leg here, I'm not doing a Ruben Sierra or anything. I'm not even doing a Mel Ott. This is still a relatively tame, controlled motion with the front leg. The knee can bend a little bit. I like to straighten it out though, and then 100% weight shift. I like this. I like all of this stuff that I've just been telling you about, but particularly like it because I think this would work really well for kids whose stature is shorter than usual. I hate it that baseball has become a game for big, tall guys. Basketball is basically, we know about basketball, even football. Not a lot of places for, you can have a running back who's a short, powerful guy, but there are not a lot of positions for short people in football. Baseball used to value smaller players, but doesn't seem like there's much they can do, especially with ironically, the short bat, and this is 35-inch. It's a Robin Ventura model from about 35 years ago. And even this, you would not find this in any store catalog today. Today's bat is probably that much shorter, and the flare is so extreme. This is a very modest barrel compared to today's bat. If you're a short kid, to make use of a bat like that for maximum effect, that big old wine bottle barrel that you got to really come down on the ball with long arms and long legs and lots of appendages that simply because of their length will accelerate the fall of the barrel. And of course a short guy doesn't have